Hey y'all, so you have immigration questions. I have answers. We are going to be going through and answering your questions because you all have so many questions and you always want to make sure that you are getting the right information. So let's talk about it. If you are joining me live, you know you can ask me questions in the comments. If you are watching this on the replay, go ahead and put your questions in the comments because I do go back and answer those. So, what we're going to do is basically, while I'm waiting for you to ask me questions, I am going to respond to questions that I already received, and I will be answering your questions live. So, if you have questions, remember, go ahead and ask it in the comments. And like I said, I will be responding to your questions live and answering questions that people send to me ahead of time. All right. So, first question: how can I marry someone who lives in Canada while I live in the US? Well, it depends. So, if they are able to travel to the US, let's say they're a Canadian citizen and they have the visa waiver, so they're able to come to the US, you can get married in the US. Most states will let someone from Canada get married in their state. They just need proof of ID and they will be able to marry you in your state. So it doesn't matter if they're from Canada, they just need to have their passport and you can get married in your state. If they are not able to travel to the US, the question becomes, are you able to travel to Canada to see them? And if Canada will allow you to get married there without being a resident. So that's really the question there. I can tell you what will happen if she's able to come to the US, or if that person is able to come to the US, you will be able to get married in the US. However, I cannot tell you if you will be able to get married in Canada. Another thing to Another way you can get married is if you are able to travel to Canada and for some reason, Canadian laws do not allow you to get married there, you can get married online in Utah, right? You just have to go through and get married online in Utah and then go to Canada to see your spouse, okay? So those are your options. Either they come to the US and you get married here, or if you're able to get married in Canada, get married in Canada. Or if you're not able to get married in Canada, but you're able to travel to Canada, you can go ahead and get married online in Utah and then go and see your spouse in Canada. So, three options. Hopefully, one of them works for you. All right, let's see. Um, if approved case to card being produced, how long does it take? Okay, so if your case is approved and the card is being produced, how long does that take? Typically, it will take anywhere from a week to a month, right? You have to remember that the place that actually produces the card is not owned by USCIS. It's a contractor, so they have their own time frame. But typically, within a month, you should get the card. My friend wants to know how she can get a green card. She overstayed her B1 visa. So once you overstay your B1 visa, your options become very, very limited. If you do get married to a U.S. citizen, the U.S. citizen can file for you here in the U.S. without you needing to leave to get that benefit. If that is not an option, right, then you have to look at how long have you overstayed, because if you overstayed, let's say for a month, then you may want to look at other options like employment based, which will most likely require you to leave the US, right? So depending on how long you've overstayed, that's also going to determine your options, because if you overstay for 180 days or more, if you leave the US, you'll have a 3-year bar. If you overstayed for a year or more and you leave the US, you'll have a 10-year bar. So it really comes down to how long have you overstayed and is leaving an option. If leaving is an option, then you would have more options as far as how you can get your green card. So employment will now be an option, investment will now be an option as well. But if you're in the US and you have overstayed, your options are either being an immediate relative of a US citizen, so that means having a spouse or a child that's over 21 that is willing to file for you, and they must be a US citizen, okay, for this to work in the US. Or looking at humanitarian options, for example, if the person qualifies for asylum, that may be a route to go that will eventually lead to a green card. Two other options that will eventually lead to a green card are T visas and U visas. So U visas for people that are victims of certain crimes, and T visas are victims of trafficking. That's labor trafficking, sex trafficking, all sorts of trafficking, and that are willing to report their traffickers. So I hope that was helpful. If you have more questions, please go ahead, put them in the comments. I am literally here just to answer your questions today. All right. All right. Next question. What happens if you apply for a green card while your immigration case is pending? So this actually happened recently where we had a green card pending and also um, an asylum case pending. And what you do in those situations is you wait for your green card to be approved, you get your green card in the mail, and then you can ask USCIS to withdraw your asylum application because you no longer need it in order to remain in the US. One thing to keep in mind is part of applying for a green card, USCIS has the right to ask you about why you filed for asylum, and do not get, shocked when they start asking you, because one, they have your asylum application, right? They have your asylum application. They know what you put in there as the reason that you're afraid to go back to your home country. And they have every right to ask you some questions about it because they need to know and basically put in their notes that they do not believe that you, right, that you made a frivolous asylum application. What does that mean? They want to make sure that you actually had a genuine fear of persecution in your home country, right? That you actually have a genuine fear. So if they're asking you questions about your asylum case, just know that's the reason, because they want to make sure that you did not just file an asylum application and make up facts on your asylum application. Okay. So they have your asylum application right there and they have your green card application in front of them. So at your interview, the officer can ask you questions from your asylum application. All right. All right. So if someone gets married, how long does it take to get a work permit? Right now, USCIS is really doing good with work permits based on green card applications for spouses of US citizens. They've been doing really good on those. Right now, we're seeing about, it can literally be anywhere from a month to 8 months. Okay. They're really trying to move quickly on those because they know how important those work permits are. So we have been seeing them approved way faster than before. So you just want to be ready for that. And because they're approving those faster, they are not. So if they approve the work permit in a month and you also apply for a travel permit, typically they will process those together to give you a combination card that you can use for travel and for work. But if they approve your work permit in like a month, that's not going to include a travel permit. So just know that and do not expect a combination card when that work permit is approved, because the travel permit has to also be approved in order for you to get that combination card. If the travel permit is approved later, you will get an I-94 that will give you that parole document that you can then use to travel. All right. So remember, if you have questions, put them in the comments. I am here to answer your questions. All right. What about expedited naturalization for military spouses? How who are married to a U.S. citizen, active duty military member, currently stationed overseas? Oof. So, can you get expedited processing? Most likely, you do. What I typically recommend is reaching out to. There's a specific. This is what people don't know. If you are in the military and you would like your case to be expedited, they have a specific, if you go on the USCIS website, they have a specific contact number, email address for members of the military that would like expedited processing or want updates on their case or want whatever you want on your case. There is a special number just for members of the military. So that's where I typically send people that want that expedite because it is unique. Okay. It is just for members of the military. It's not for anyone else. So you're going to get a response faster than if you know, if you don't, if you do it the regular way through the regular USCIS contacts. So that's how you would do that. Because you're stationed overseas, that's a separate issue because you still have to come back to the US for your interview because they don't, a naturalization application requires an interview. They typically do not waive those interviews, even for spouses that are stationed overseas. So you just need to make sure that your timing on that is right, so that you're actually here in order to apply, to go to that interview when the time comes. Okay. Next question. I was inadmissible for 5 years. Has been completed. Do I need the form I-212 if I complete at 5 years? It depends. So you need the form 212 if that 5 years is because you were given expedited removal. Okay. Expedited removal means you're going to need that 212 even if you have completed the 5 years because you have a removal order, right? So even though you finish the 5 years, you still need that. So it's just like someone that has a permanent bar. Um, if you have a permanent bar and you are outside of the US for the full 10 years and you can prove your 10 years, you'll still need an I-212 in order to then be able to get that visa. Okay. So yes, it's great that you've completed your 5 years, but you're still going to need that 212 waiver because of that removal. Okay. Next question. What documents should I carry when going to my green card interview with my spouse? So I have a whole video on my YouTube channel on what documents to take and how to prepare for your green card interview. But just quickly, you need proof of who you are. So IDs, marriage certificate, birth certificates. You need proof of your relationship. That's really the key there. So proof of who you are, and then proof of your relationship. Those are the main documents that you're going to need for your interview. And you need to make sure that you have it. If you have been married before and you've gotten a divorce, or you have your prior spouse pass away, you need to make sure that you include the divorce certificate or the death certificate, because if you do not have those, the officer can request it later, which will delay them making a decision on your case. So you want to make sure that you have proof of your relationship, proof of your that you're legally married, that you legally ended all prior marriages, and proof of your identity. So your spouse does not, whoever is not the that's applying for a green card, needs to make sure that they bring their passport. If they have an approved work permit, to bring that document with them as well. If you have more than one passport, meaning you came in with one, it expired, now you have a new one, bring both of them. Sometimes an officer wants to see both. So it's better to have more than less. And then print out anything you want the officer to have as proof of your relationship. Okay. Do not just be like, oh, I have pictures on my phone. They want to include that in the file because guess what? The USCIS officer has a supervisor, and the supervisor can choose to audit the file. And if they don't see documentation in there that's required, it's going to be a problem for the officer. So the officer is always going to ask you for more documents to put in the file. All right. Oh, Brian on Facebook. Hi, we are not live on TikTok. So sorry, but we are live on Instagram, and on Instagram it is Lily Legal. So feel free to join us either on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. So all three of those is Lily Legal. All right. Next question. Do you have to take a test if you're applying for what? Okay. Leona on Instagram, can you just tell me what you're applying for so that I know if you need to take a test or not? Okay. All right. What are the best options to take if one is trying to get a job in the US and the company is starting onboarding soon, especially if you don't have the rights to live and work in the US? All right. So, one, the company needs to be willing to file for you because in order for you to onboard with them and work in their US office, you need to have that visa to come to the US, and that visa needs to allow you to work in the US. If it's a US company that's hiring you and you're going to be working outside of the US for that US company, you don't have to worry about visas or any of that. You can work for the company from outside of the US. But if the company wants you to physically work in the US, that company needs to file some form of visa application for you in order for you to then be able to come to the US and work for that company. Okay. So that's a conversation you need to have with the company to make sure that they are really understanding that you do not live in the US and you do not have a right to work in the US so that they know what to do. So the company has to file for you. Okay. What do I need to do to book an appointment with you? Oh, great question. So you can either call my office at 508 443-1788, or you can go to my website, lilylegal.com/contact us, and you will be able to actually book a strategy session right on the website. You don't have to call. You can just see my calendar, see when I'm available, and schedule that strategy session. So those are the two ways that you can do that. Okay, Leona, do you have to take a test when applying for citizenship? Yes. Yes, you do. Um, unless, right? Yes, you do, unless you meet certain exceptions. But for the most part, you do have to take that test. So the exceptions is if you have had your green card for a certain number of years, and if you're over 55, I believe it's 1555, 2050. So 20 years of having your green card and you're 50 years or older, 15 years of having your green card and you're 55 years or older, you will get a less crazy exam, right? Right? You'll have a less intense exam. If you are 65 and older and have had your green card for 20 years, you will have 20. So instead of studying 100 questions, you will only study 20 questions and you only have to get like 5 of them right. So it definitely gets easier the older you are and the longer you've had your green card. But if you are just getting your green card and you just hit your 5 years, you are going to have to take the full exam. The other exception is for medical reasons. So if you have a medical condition that makes it impossible for you to take the test, either take it in English or take it at all, you will need to, the doctors will need to fill out some forms to make it possible for you to get that waived. But that would be the options there. But for the majority of people, you'll have to take the test. How do you tell them to file for the visa? Okay, so the company that is, if they are hiring you, right? If the company is hiring you and they know you're not physically in the US and you do not have a right to work in the US, that has to be a conversation with the company, right? They have to know that during the hiring process, and understand that if they're going to hire you for that position, you are not going to be able to just come to the US and work. Most companies know this if they're extending offers to people outside of the US. So you have to, if they don't know that you're not able to legally work in the US, that's something they need to know. Um, and then that becomes a conversation of, since I don't have status in the US, are you willing to file a visa application for me? Right? So that needs to be negotiated as part of your hiring. If I am in Nigeria, can I still have a session remotely with you? Yes. So if you go on the website, the strategy sessions are remote. So it's either a phone call or um, a video call. So the phone calls are through WhatsApp for people outside of the US, and video calls are through Teams. So you can join. We'll send you the link. You don't have to be in the US. So most of our strategy sessions, 99% of them are remote. So you can definitely do it from Nigeria. All right. If you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. You guys have had really great questions today, by the way. It's so good to answer your questions and just get the what you all are thinking about, what immigration issues are coming up for you. Because guess what? One thing I always tell people is, just because other people are not asking that question doesn't mean they don't have the same exact questions. So I'm always happy when you ask me questions, so that not only does it help you to get an answer, it also helps other people too, to get an answer. All right. So, next question. Remember, keep putting your questions in the comments. I am more than happy to respond. All right. So, how about an I-601 waiver for moral turpitude? So, in the US, right, if you are convicted of certain crimes, they are seen, for immigration purposes, they can be seen as a crime involving moral turpitude. Okay. And if it is seen as a crime involving moral turpitude, then you are going to be needing um, a waiver. And that waiver is the I-601 waiver. The one thing you need to know about the I-601 waiver is, for the most part, it requires you to have a US citizen or permanent resident spouse or parent that's going to suffer extreme hardship if you were not allowed to remain in the US. Okay. Or if they had to leave the US with you. So you have to show this hardship in order for that crime to be waived. And not every single crime involving moral turpitude can be waived. So you really want to, get a um, detailed assessment of what the crime is and if it can be waived or not, and if you have the qualifying relative to make that waiver actually work. Actually, we're going to be talking about that soon in an upcoming video with a real life example, so stay tuned for that. It's thing like This is a great question because it's literally playing out in the media right now for a specific Real Housewives of Atlanta husband. So we'll be talking about that, using his situation as a real life example of what you can do and how U.S. immigration is not to be played with when it comes to certain things. So stay tuned for that. Next question. Can I open an LLC while my green card is pending? Can you open an LLC? Yes. Can you work? No. Right? If you have a approved work permit, then yes, you can not only open the LLC, but you can work in the LLC. If you are married to a US citizen and you're filing your green card based on that marriage to a US citizen, or you're the immediate relative of a US citizen, and that immediate relative is the one filing the green card for you, any work you do that's unauthorized will be waived. Okay, so USCIS will waive any unauthorized work that you do while you do not have a work permit. So, can you open the LLC? Yes. Can you work within the LLC? No, unless you have a work permit. But if you're applying through and if you are an immediate relative of a US citizen and that immediate relative is filing for you, then the unauthorized work is waived and won't affect your ability to get your green card. All right. I and my partner just got married. She's a US citizen. What do we do next since I'm undocumented? Thanks. So, if you are physically in the US, if you're saying that you're undocumented, typically, that means you're physically in the US. The question becomes, did you enter the US with authorization? Meaning, did you come in with a visa? If you did, you can file a green card application with all the necessary relative petitions and all of that, and the supporting documents. So that would typically be the next step as far as filing. But what should be your next step will most likely be scheduling a strategy session with an immigration lawyer to basically make sure that there's no issues in your case. There's nothing that will raise red flags for USCIS, because that's really the key. You do not want your application to raise red flags. You really want to make sure that everything is done correctly and you are including all the documents that's going to help you USCIS make a decision, a favorable decision in your case. So you want to start with that, getting a consultation with an immigration lawyer. Like I said, if you want to schedule a strategy session with me, you can go to my website, lilylegal.com, and do that. But that's usually the first step. And then after that is the filing of the relative petition, the green card application, the work permit, all of that. I will want to let you know, right? Want to let you know that you want to file, if you're already married, you say you just got married, listen, you can file right now. But you want to make sure that USCIS receives your application before April 1st, because if they receive your application on April 1st or after, you're going to be paying over $1,000 more than you would if you file now. Okay. If you file before April 1st, you're going to be getting your relative petition, the green card application, the work permit, the travel permit, all of that for $1,760. After April 1st, add $1,000 to that. Okay. Just so just keep that in mind as you're thinking about this. Great question, Michael. So I'm a US citizen. Can I submit an I-864W if my child is eligible? The answer is yes. So if your child is eligible, USCIS or the embassy will prefer for you to file an I-864W. And sometimes they will even ask for it specifically instead of the regular I-864. So keep that in mind. So if you are doing consular processing, meaning you're going through the National Visa Center Sometimes they actually ask you specifically for it, but if they don't, you can still, if your child qualifies, you can still upload it and they will accept that without needing anything else. Okay. All right. Remember, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I am literally just here to answer your questions today. Um, all right, next question. I filed an I-130 3 months ago, but my stepdad was approved by the humanitarian parole to come to the US. He's already here. May I apply for the I-485 already, or do I have to fix the I-130 first? This is a great question because people think, um, so people in this situation, it's going to happen a lot more as this parole for certain countries continue. This is not a problem, right? This is actually a great thing because now that the stepfather is here, they can go ahead and file the I-485. And the great thing about that is you can also include the work permit and the travel permit and get the same price if you do it before April 1st. So yes, definitely this person can go ahead and file that I-485, the green card application. You do not have to do anything else, even though the I-130 is pending. Okay, so even though the I-130 is still pending, there's no decision on the I-130. You can still go ahead and file that green card application now that that person is in the US and be able to have the I-130 and the green card application processed here in the US. It's a great, great thing. So congratulations to you that you are able to now skip an additional step of dealing with the embassy. You just have to deal with USCIS. All right. How much does it cost to file an application for citizenship? So before April 1st, 2024, the fee is $725. After April 1st, I do not have the fees on top of my head, but it is going to go slightly higher. So the fee as of today, if you're applying for citizenship, is $725 unless you're 75 and older. Then you So if you're 75 and older, you don't need a biometrics fee, so it'll be $85 less. So that's just the only thing there. Let me, you know what? While we're talking, let me see if I can get that for you, so that you have all the information you need in one place. If anyone else has questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. Remember, this is literally for you to get you information to make sure that you are informed as you know as you're going through this immigration um, process, right? There's so much to do and to know when it comes to US immigration, and knowing what you know what to do every single step of the way is really important. So that's why I always do these Q&As at the end of the month. So I let people ask me questions. We get to collect all your questions, and then you get to also ask me questions live. So that way, I not only get to give you live, answer your questions live, but also get to give you the information for the people that ask questions ahead of time so that everyone is learning, we are all growing and being informed. Okay. Next question while I pull that up for you. Please, can I file for my 23-year-old daughter? If yes, how long does it take? I am a permanent resident. Great question. One, yes, you can file for your 23-year-old daughter as a permanent resident. How long is it going to take? It can take 7 to 8 years. Okay. It's going to take that long. As long as your daughter remains unmarried. Okay, that's the trick there. If your daughter becomes married before you get your citizenship, you have to start all over again. If they get married after you get your citizenship, that's acceptable, but it's going to take more like 10 to 13 years. Okay? So that's the trade-off there. So you can file for the daughter that's 23 as a permanent resident. They must stay unmarried until you become a citizen. And if they decide to get married, you are now going to have to wait longer. So you're looking at like 13 years longer. So instead of 7 to 8 years, you're looking at 13 years or more waiting once they get married. But remember, no marriage. This is the key. Once you file for an adult child as a permanent resident, there can be no marriage for the child until you become a citizen. That means until you get your certificate of citizenship in your hand, not until you file for citizenship, but until you have that certificate in your hand, they cannot get married. All right. Because I have seen that mess up people's whole process. Okay. So just keep that in mind. All right. Okay. So Leona was asking earlier how much the citizenship would be. So like I said, if you file before April 1st, it's 725. If you file after April 1st, on or after April 1st, if you file online, it's going to be 710. So it's going to be less. If you file on paper, meaning that you mailed in your application, it's going to be 760. So file online if you can. So that's what we're going to be doing for our clients moving forward. It's just getting them to file online just so they can, if they want to save that extra $50. All right, next question. I am a green card holder. Can I interview my daughter who's in Ghana to pay me? Hmm. Oh, I do not understand your question. So on Instagram, I'm trying to make sure I understand your question. So you are a green card holder, you have a daughter who's in Ghana. Can you give me more information, please? Because I'm a little pay me a visa in the US. A visit? Okay, I think you mean a visit visa to the US. So I'm going to assume that's what you mean. So you have a daughter that is in Ghana, you're filing for her to get her green card eventually, but it's going to take ages and you want to know if she can get a visiting visa to the US in the meantime. Yes, but she has to qualify for the visiting visa. So when it comes to visiting visas, it's not really about you, the permanent resident, or you, the US citizen that's in the US. You can send her an invitation, but that invitation is only like 1% of what offices look at to make a decision. Okay. It's only 1% of what offices look at, not the main thing they look at. The main thing they look at is whether she qualifies for a visa, whether she can show that she has enough going on with her that she will go back to Ghana once she finishes her visit. That's really what the officer wants to know. And if, let's say, she is 23, just got out of university, doesn't really have a job yet, doesn't have a family, doesn't have anything going on in Ghana for her, the chances of her getting that visa is going to be slim to none because she's not showing ties to Ghana. Okay. So your invitation is great. It helps to show that, this is what they're coming to the US for. But okay. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult because you have to show that they're going to go back. So you have to have documentation showing that they're going to go back, whether they're in school. So if they are, let's say they're in boarding school and you already paid the fees for that, those are good evidence. Like if they participate in any sort of extra activities in school that they need to be there for, those are good things that you can include. However, if you, okay, let me put this way. If anyone in her family has overstayed their visa, it's going to make it more difficult for the officer to say yes to it. And also, for a green card holder file for a child, it that's under 12 years, under 21, it is going to be faster than if they were over 21. So when I was talking about the 7 to 8 years, I'm talking about children that are over 21, not children that are under 21. So it is going to be a bit, it is going to be years faster. So you want to also weigh that option. And then the officer is also going to look at how soon can you become a citizen. So if you're only like a few months to qualifying for citizenship, that's going to also weigh in decision making, because the officer knows that once you become a citizen and your daughter enters the US with that visa, you can just file for them in the US. And even if, right, here's the other thing, even if you're not a citizen and your daughter enters the US because she's a minor, you can technically file for them to get their green card in the US. So that's also something that's going to weigh against her being able to get that visa, unless you can show that she is definitely going back. And the officer believes that she is definitely going back. All right. All right. So if you have more questions, go ahead, put them in the comments. I am here to answer your questions and make sure that you are informed on US immigration. Um, all right. So I do not see any questions coming up. You are very welcome. Like I said, I am here to answer your question. All right. Next question. I was admitted into the US with a K1 visa while I was required to stay in my home country for 2 years after having a residency requirement for student visa. Now I can't adjust until I go back. Okay. So you may qualify for a waiver depending on the country. Okay. So some countries are more willing than others to yeah, some countries are more willing than others to waive that residency requirement, but depending on you'll need a more detailed consultation to know if you would qualify for a waiver and the steps that you can take to get that waiver. So the home residency requirement, it is a requirement, but in some situations you will be in some situations you may be able to qualify for a waiver that you can apply for um, through your government, your home government, and once that is approved you can send that into USCIS with your application. If they already denied the green card application or is still pending, you can still include that and then they will be able to approve you. But yes, those are your two options. It's either you go back home for the 2 years or you get a waiver. And again, you can apply for the waiver from the US. Can my spouse file for my children overseas under 18 since we got married, or I have to wait for her to file for me, then she can file for them? So your spouse can file for your children. So because they're under 18, they qualify as her stepchildren. So it will be just as if she was filing for her own children. Okay. So yes, your spouse can definitely file for your children. It's not dependent on your application. However, I will say this, you still have to prove your relationship, right? You still have to include proof of your relationship. So the marriage certificate, proof of you and your spouse living together and building a life together, just to make sure that that application process goes through. Because your marriage is under 2 years old, US And depending on when they get the visa interview, they may have a 2-year green card instead of a 10-year one, that once they get into the US, they will have to apply to remove the condition. So it's really just about how long everything takes. So they may end up with a 10-year, they may end up with a 2-year, but regardless, your your spouse can go ahead and file for them now, even before they file for you. Um, if someone applied for a green card before completing 1 year of asylum, when they are going to process their green card? Hmm, think. All right. So if you get asylum, you're supposed to wait 1 year and then apply for a green card. However, the rules were recently changed that if you have been physically present in the US for a year, it doesn't matter if it was before your asylum was approved or after your asylum was approved, you can apply for a green card. So let's say the person came in with asylum and it has not been a year, they have to wait for the whole year. Okay. So if they physically entered the US already with asylum, so a refugee coming into the US, they will have to wait a full year of physical presence in the US before they can then apply for a green card. However, if the person, let's say you came to the US, you applied for asylum, and in most jurisdictions, it took like 5, 6 years for your asylum to go through to an officer and be approved. In those situations, you can go ahead and apply for a green card without waiting an additional year. So those rules were changed recently. So that 1 year waiting is just physical presence in the U.S., not physical presence while your asylum, after your asylum was approved. So they changed that. I hope that was helpful. If you're joining me and you have questions, put them in the comments. I am here to help. And if you are getting value out of this video, please go ahead and hit the like button. It really does help when you do that. So go ahead, hit the like button. Tell me you are getting value out of this and ask me questions if you have any. All right. All right. Next question I have here. I'm going to wait to see if you have any other questions, but I'm going to go to this next question. How much income will this individual, they're talking about the I-134A parole, right? If they are sponsoring someone with parole, how much will this individual contribute to the beneficiaries annually? What is the minimum required? All right. So, if you are petitioning or sponsoring someone under the I-134A parole program, there is no specific amount that you have to give the person every year. You do have to meet certain income requirements to qualify as a sponsor. However, once the person gets here with that parole, they can apply for work permit and start working and supporting themselves. There's no specific amount. The US government just doesn't want that person to end up on public assistance, right? What they do want is that if they were going to go on public assistance and you are supposedly their sponsor, that you are giving them support so that they do not need to rely on the government. However, if the person is able to work, they get their work permit and they're working, you do not have to give them a certain amount of money because they are able to support themselves. That's all the government cares about, is that the person does not, all the government cares about is that the person is not on any kind of government assistance. That's what they care about. They don't really care if they're working and supporting themselves or if you're the one supporting them. That's not their concern. Their main concern is they're not getting government assistance. However, y'all figure out the support, that's between you two. The government doesn't care about that. All right. Um, Oh, this is another great question. Do I have to pay for my stamp in the passport? So this is for the I-551 stamp, the ADIT stamp that you can apply for if, let's say, your green card expired and you're filing for a renewal. The renewal has not come in yet, and you need proof of your green card. You can an ADIT stamp, and that will basically serve the same purpose as your physical green card. Now, do you have to pay to get that ADIT stamp? No, you do not. You do have to show proof that you have a renewal pending, right? You have an I-90 pending, or you have an I-751 pending in order for that ADIT stamp to be given to you, but you do not have to pay separately for it. All right. So I do not see any other questions. Please let me know in the comments if you have questions. If I don't see any, then we can end this here. Thank you all so much for joining me. I truly enjoy answering your questions. I know immigration can be very confusing and there's so many parts to it, but I love what I do, and um, I hope you got value out of this. Like I said, if you did get value out of it, go ahead, hit the like button, share this video, and join me on most Fridays. I do try to take one Friday off every month. But the last Fridays of the month, we are here with the Q&As. And then the other Fridays that I am doing the lives, you can ask me questions then too, okay? Just because I probably will be teaching something or going over either new laws and things, you can still ask me questions whenever I am live. Okay, one more question. How long does it take to file for green card after you get married to your? So, are you asking? Okay, so I'm going to answer this two ways. How long does it take to get the green card? After you get married, it depends where you live. Right now, we're seeing anywhere from 6 months if there's no interviews, to a year if there are interviews. So it can really range between those. We have seen some in like a couple of months. Those are rare, but typically, if there's no interview, it's pretty quick than before, right? If there is an interview, it's typically closer to 10 months to a year. Um, And then if you're asking how long does it take to fill the forms, it depends on each person's information. I have people that have lived like in 10 places in the past 5 years and worked in 20 places in the past 5 years. So it just depends on your information, but it does take time because you need to be very detail oriented and make sure that every information you're putting in there is accurate and correct. Okay, spellings, dates, everything. So those are the two ways I can answer your question because I'm not really clear on what exactly you're asking. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me. Remember, hit that like button, share this video, join me on the Fridays that I go live. And like I said, I will be taking one Friday off a month just for my own sanity, but you will know every single last Friday of the month, unless I tell you otherwise, we will be going live and doing these Q&As. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time.